You know, I had a little bit of hope. After replaying Trigger Happy Havoc and generally having an alright time with it, I thought that maybe, just maybe, the other two Danganronpa games wouldn't be as bad as I remembered them being. They were. Danganronpa 2 is a bad game. The title of this video indicates as much. But why is it bad? This is so often considered a near-perfect sequel that improves nearly everything about the first game. I strongly disagree. Every problem I had with Trigger Happy Havoc is still present, and in almost every case, is now a much bigger problem. In fact, I don't think there's a single aspect of Danganronpa 2 that I feel like is a significant enough improvement to warrant praising it in comparison to the first game. Let's start with the premise. Once again, a group of high schoolers are trapped together, only this time their teacher is a stuffed rabbit instead of a bear, and actually, they are allowed to leave as soon as everyone becomes friends with one another. This is when it's revealed that the students are not actually at Hope's Peak like they thought, but instead on a tropical island. See, there's no killing, everyone just needs to be happy and get along, and oh no! Monokuma's back and this actually is a killing game. Who would have guessed? I genuinely can't tell if they were trying to pull the wool over the player's eyes here. The game is subtitled Goodbye Despair, and they even made a super fun happy friendship opening. But I think everyone saw the quote-unquote twist coming, and they even used the regular intro when you first boot up the game. So why can't the game just start in killing mode? Usami/Monami couldn't be introduced in the same way, but who cares? Monami is annoying and doesn't really add anything to the game. She has plot relevance, but could very easily be written out. I would gladly trade her to move the game along faster. And the pacing, my god, the pacing. If you thought Trigger Happy Havoc was slow, I've got some bad news for you. That was one of my complaints last time, but ultimately it wasn't a huge issue overall. The same can't be said for this game. The first chapter of 1 concluded about 4.5 hours in. Danganronpa 2's first chapter lasts 7. It was agonizing. After that, the pacing of the non-trial sections was about the same as the first game, but the trials are now significantly longer, and I honestly started to get bored of them, which really sucks because they were the highlight of the first game, and well, they're still the highlight, but I was much less engaged than last time, and there are multiple reasons for that. The cases have drastically increased in complexity compared to the first game, which probably partially accounts for their increased length. I would say this is a good thing overall, the complexity, not the length, I mean. At their best, Danganronpa 2's cases have some of the most interesting situations in the series, specifically looking at Trials 4 and 5. Yet despite that, I would say the Trials are a step down from the first game, mostly because 2, 3, and 6 are all pretty terrible, which accounts for half of the Trials in the game. That's a problem. I think even Case 6 of Trigger Happy Havoc was better than any of those three, and that was easily my least favorite in that game. The actual gameplay of the Trials is still great, though I'm pretty mixed on the changes made to the minigames. There are two new ones this time, Rebuttal Showdown and Logic Dive, both of which help the tedium issues a little bit by providing more varied gameplay. Logic Dive is great. It's literally just a run level, but it's by far the most unique of the games, and I was excited every time it showed up. The collision needs some work, though. Rebuttal Showdown is amazing conceptually. Few things in the game give me as much of an energy boost as one of the characters suddenly cutting in with a relevant quip to destroy your argument, and the idea of literally cutting through your opponent's words with a blade is incredible. Plus, all the stupid puns are really funny to me and add a level of irony to the game's ridiculousness that is sorely needed in many other places.
Your reasoning is out of focus.
I won't let you look down on me! Allow me to cut through those words!
If only Rebuttal Showdown was actually fun. When I imagine cutting through an argument with a sword, I picture fast-paced, stylish gameplay. This isn't it. The cutting is locked to 8 directions, and you are both limited to a certain number of cuts and have a cooldown after each one. And there's a mechanic where you deal double damage to a statement if you slice twice in one direction, then once in the opposite, but it's only required like once in the entire game. Rebuttal Showdown isn't bad by any means, but it could have been so much more. It was probably my favorite idea for a trial minigame in the entire series, but its potential is only partially realized here. I think it would be better to speed it up and increase the amount of things to hit significantly, keeping the cooldown but removing the cut restriction. That way, the focus would be on slicing at the correct angle to maximize the amount of words you hit. That's actually what the final Rebuttal Showdown is like, and it made me wish all the other ones played like that. Still, I'm happy it's here. I would say it's a positive inclusion overall. In addition to the two new games, all of the ones from the first game return, each of them getting changed significantly. Non-stop debates now have spots where you can agree with other characters, and the amount of times you need to absorb statements was reduced, so they were significantly improved overall. Although that's the only one that was improved. I am not confident that Bullet Time Battle's replacement, Panic Talk Action, is better. The name is certainly a step down. Panic Talk Action is also much easier, and I'm not sure that's a good thing. Bullet Time Battle was really hectic, and getting back into a rhythm was extremely difficult if you messed up. But I kinda like that. Panic Talk action just comes and goes. Bullet time battle is an event. Combined with the fact it's more colorful, I'd say I probably prefer that version of this game. On the other side of the spectrum is Hangman's Gambit 2.0. Trigger Happy Havoc's Hangman's Gambit was so easy, just click the next letter of the word when it shows up. And I guess they certainly fixed that problem.
I got it!
Hangman's Gambit 2.0 was overly complicated and incredibly unintuitive. Letters will appear at random and move across the screen in a straight line. If two of the same letters touch, they will combine and stop moving. If two different letters touch, they explode and you lose health. Right-clicking a combined letter will add it to the word you're trying to spell if it's correct, and you can also pick up and store a single letter by left-clicking it, and the next time you left-click, you'll shoot it wherever your cursor is. And on top of all that, combined letters will expire after a certain amount of time and damage you unless they collide with another of the same letter, which makes them bigger and resets the timer. Yeah, it's a mess. I'll admit, once I finally managed to master Hangman's Gambit 2.0, it actually flowed really nicely and was pretty fun. But by the time that happened, I was just about done with the game. It was a major pain for the majority of my playtime. Finally is the closing argument, which I think had the biggest downgrade. I really liked figuring out where each piece went over time and using process of elimination to sort out which were fakes. Now the game just gives them to you in groups of 5 and you have to use all of the real pieces in that group before moving to the next. Since the game immediately tells you when you put one in the wrong place, there weren't any moments where I realized my mistakes and corrected them myself, and it lacks the satisfaction of knowing you managed to figure out the entire puzzle on your own by the end. Is the trial gameplay an improvement over Trigger Happy Havoc's? Overall, yeah, I'd say so. It's just that for nearly every step forward, there's an equally sized step back. Hangman's Gambit 2.0, the new closing argument, and half of the time Rebuttal Showdown negatively affected my trial experience when they showed up. But those minigames, as well as the poor pacing, are not the biggest detractors from my enjoyment of Danganronpa 2's cases. If you saw my last video, or maybe even if you didn't, you can probably guess what that would be. It's the characters. The cast of Danganronpa 2 is very bad, but not for the reason I was expecting. I thought the characters were going to be really annoying, and some of them were, but my main issue is that they're just so boring. Most of the characters weren't interesting in the slightest. They didn't necessarily make me angry, I just straight up didn't care what happened to them. And the epitome of this is the game's protagonist, Hajime. I'm not gonna claim Makoto was the most interesting character, but he at the very least had unique, discernible character traits from the rest of the cast. Hajime does not. I genuinely cannot think of a single word to describe his personality that doesn't also apply to the other Danganronpa protagonists. He is the most generic character in the entire series. Makoto had a clear desire to save everyone and managed to keep everyone together in the end. If you hypothetically played Danganronpa 1 from the perspective of a different character, Makoto would still serve a purpose prior to the last 5% of the game. Hajime wouldn't. None of his contributions are even remotely chained to him. Everything he does could easily be done by someone else and nothing about the game would change. I want to play as a character, not a plot point. In my Trigger Happy Havoc review, I said I enjoyed a little less than half of the characters in the game. In Danganronpa 2, I liked 2 of them. Nekomaru was really fun. His sprites are awesome and most of his lines put a smile on my face due to how nice and genuine of a guy he was. He's definitely one of the funniest characters in the series, despite the subject matter of a lot of his humor. You see, Nekomaru has a bowel condition, and yeah, you could probably figure out where I'm going from that. Now, I'm not overly fond of bathroom humor, but I don't know, the way he so openly brings it up was amusing almost every time. It's not the jokes themselves, it's how they're told, and I think there is something funny about Nekomaru having a conversation with you and then screaming at the top of his lungs, "The more I try to hold it in, the more it wants to come out!" I have not watched the Danganronpa 3 show, and I have no plans to, but I have seen one clip from it, which I will play for you now.
Hey, whatever it is, it's definitely getting closer.
Oh God, Jurassic Park!
Whatever. It's just the pipes.
More like Jurassic shit!
Is everyone okay back there? Yes.
Damn, it's like a bomb went off.
Sorry, all. Had a bit of a log jam today, if you know what I'm saying.
Wow, more damage than normal, need I?
Yeah, that's my bad. When you gotta go, you gotta go.
The poop jokes are far from all of the enjoyment I got from him, luckily. Probably even funnier out of context is his last free time event where he tells Hajime to get naked, and when Hajime asks why, he says, "Oh, don't worry about it, just do it." Other than him, I liked Hiyoko when she was relentlessly bullying people, and hated her when she was crying and acting like a 10-year-old, which was most of the time. The entire cast ganging up on her for smelling bad was really funny, and to be completely clear, she isn't the other character I liked. We'll talk about that person in the spoiler section. I really thought I might like Gundam. His design is incredible, and he was pretty entertaining at first, not to mention the 4 Dark Devas of Destruction, the best characters in the series, but his shtick of talking like... well, I don't even know how to describe it, so I'll just play a few clips.
You may call me Gundam Tanaka. Remember it well, for it is the name that will one day rule this world. Are you saying he predicted the murder? Could it be? Was he also in possession of the all-seeing eye? That is merely an illusion you have fabricated from your own suspicion.
It gets old fast, and he fails to add discussion to trials and move chapters along due to his way of speaking and commitment to his lone wolf personality. At the very least, he does have one of my favorite exchanges in the game.
Is that it? A shepherd dressed in his Sunday's finest still reeks of lamb, Hajime Hinata.
Does that mean you have a rebuttal?
Does that mean you have a rebuttal? That's a good line.
Gundam is annoying, but not as annoying as Ibuki. I wouldn't say she's my least favorite character in the game, but that's due to specific circumstances. If we're going by the amount of mental pain I felt when a character showed up, Ibuki ranks number 1 in that regard. She's painfully unfunny, is incredibly stupid, and doesn't move the plot along in any way. What a great collection of character traits. There's a scene where Ibuki starts saying everything twice for no particular reason, and it's hilarious, I assure you. That was the point at which I briefly considered ending my playthrough because I just did not want to deal with this anymore. The last character I'd like to mention is Sonya, for giving me my new favorite line.
Please stop making bad jokes.
They're gonna regret giving me access to that sound clip. Danganronpa 2 is overall less funny than the first game due to the decreased amount of Byakuya. There's a good joke once in a while, and Nekomaru is great of course, but it's still a step down. Although the humor isn't quite as bad as I remembered, which made me think I might have overblown how unfunny Danganronpa was in my head. Then I watched about 5 minutes of V3 gameplay and realized where those thoughts came from. I am not playing V3 next. I am taking a break from the series to do something else. Anything else. I just realized we're this far into the video and I haven't even brought up the game's setting yet. Danganronpa 2's island theme is one of its most acclaimed and memorable aspects. I don't like it. Maybe it's mostly due to personal biases. I've never been particularly fond of beach areas in games, but I think the setting is something Trigger Happy Havoc nailed. Hope's Peak Academy locked everyone in a very small area and had an unsettling vibe everywhere you went. The situation created tension between the characters, something Danganronpa 2 almost entirely lacks. This is the main reason I dislike the island setting. It doesn't do anything to prevent the characters from being one big group of friends. Well, aside from you-know-who, of course. The UI is honestly kind of bad too. Yeah, they even managed to mess that up. Why would you put the speaker's name sideways? The aesthetic of 2 uses a lot more pixel effects, and I personally don't like it as much. That, combined with the theme, makes this my least favorite of the 3 games visually. Now, a disclaimer for my next complaint. I played this game with a controller on my Steam Deck because that was the easiest way to record gameplay while multiple people were watching me play. This control scheme is not ideal, so that might be part of the issue here, but I was not having a fun time getting around the island via fast travel. Trying to get to the places I wanted to select was needlessly frustrating. The final thing I want to talk about before getting into spoilers is the music, which, unlike the visuals, I think is an improvement from the last game. The soundtrack is less repetitive, and I think what's here is a bit better. Plus, many of the great tracks from the first game return. I particularly like the investigation themes. And just like the game itself, the Steam reviews aren't nearly as funny as its predecessors. Alright, spoiler time. Again, if you have any interest in the game, skip to my conclusion and play it blind. Let's talk about Danganronpa 2 survivors. I already complained about Hajime's unimportance, but the thing is, none of the survivors really do anything, with the exception of Fuyuhiko. And in his case, I hated him prior to his immediate character arc at the start of Chapter 3, at which point he basically becomes an entirely new character, and, viewing him as one, new Fuyuhiko does absolutely nothing either. Compare them to the survivors of the first game, all of which were involved in and accused of being the culprit of at least one of the cases for a significant amount of time. In Danganronpa 2, none of them are, except for Fuyuhiko in Case 2. They're not bad characters, I just feel even Hiro did more to earn being a survivor than any of them. I'm not saying they should have died, rather I'm suggesting to make them more involved in the cases. Kazuichi and Sonya were okay, they're both fairly likable and had a handful of good moments. Again, they just don't affect the game in any significant way besides minor things that could be replicated by other characters. Akane is the worst character in the game. Ibuki would be the worst, but at least she dies less than halfway into the game. I have to deal with Akane the entire time. She is so incredibly stupid and never contributes to discussion positively at all. All she does is cause Nekomaru to lose his body and be absent for most of Chapter 3. Thanks, Akane.
So, what's an aspersion anyway? Is it yummy?
Please stop making bad jokes!
The other two characters who make it to the final stretch of the game are far more important than any of the survivors. With that said, I still don't care for Chiaki at all, and I don't understand why she's so popular. Yes, her position and backstory are interesting, and the twist of her being the traitor is pretty well done, but personality-wise, there's just nothing there. I have a hard time caring about the characters when they barely count as characters. Also, how can Chiaki call herself the ultimate gamer when she isn't even racist or sexist? That's just wrong. And then there's Nagito, who is by far the most popular character in the series, consistently considered its best character among fans. And as much as it pains me to admit it, the Danganronpa fans are actually right about something. Well, not completely, I'm still partial to Kyoko personally, but Nagito is easily the best character in Danganronpa 2. He starts off as a clear parody of Makoto, talking about how great the Ultimates are and how everyone should focus on hope and never give in to despair. His name, Nagito Kamaeda, is even an anagram for Naegi Makoto Da, which in English means, I am Makoto Naegi. The series parodies tropes and characters like this in many ways, but Nagito is probably the only example of it actually working for me. Still, he's very helpful throughout the first chapter and comes off as a nice guy. And then you get to the first trial, and 1 hour later, you learn Nagito is completely insane, and that he has no issue with doing whatever it takes to reach his goals. He is completely willing to be a sacrifice or to act as an accomplice of the Blackened for no personal gain, all in the name of allowing someone to achieve what he calls true hope. Even though every character is given their own talent, few actually get to use them in interesting ways, and I'd argue Nagito's talent is the one that comes into play the most out of any character. Like Makoto, he is an ultimate lucky student, except they really mean lucky. In any situation where luck is involved, whatever Nagito wants to happen will happen, and he knows this. There's a part where he has to play Russian roulette, but he decides to load 5 bullets into the gun for nothing but his own personal amusement, and of course, he survives. Nagito alone is responsible for any interest the game provides, and things simply would not function without him. Much like Kyoko, he provides some of the necessary clues during trials, except Nagito gives them in the most cryptic ways he possibly can, and figuring out what he's talking about is the next puzzle. He is the best thing about Danganronpa 2, and I would say he brought my opinion on the game up a full point from a 2 out of 10 to a 3 out of 10. Of course, I'd like to talk about his trial, but before that, I want to go through and comment on each chapter of the game. Danganronpa 2 is a significantly less consistent game than the first, and as such I feel more of a need to look at each case in the game individually. Chapter 1 was agonizingly slow. Once the first murder finally happened, it improved significantly. Since case 1 is overall pretty solid, it just doesn't save it from the fact that once the investigation starts, I was done with the first trial that far into Danganronpa 1. And Chapter 2 is just as bad in that regard, but in the opposite way. The daily life and investigation are perfectly fine, but the trial is painful. The amount of meandering here is ridiculous, even for this series. For some reason, we also have to solve the murder in this unrelated video game, and spend time arguing about rules and aspects of the case that are either completely irrelevant, or outright contradict things from before. Like, Peko being the Blackened. She killed the... whatever her name is, she is the Blackened. Obviously. You are not a tool, you are a part of the 16 students who first arrived on the island. I know Monokuma was never going to let Fuyuhiko escape, but that doesn't fix the fact I have to listen to these kids argue about this obvious conclusion for 15 minutes straight. When the trial finally ended, but Sonia interrupted it and made us keep going, I was about to lose it. Chapter 3 is usually considered one of, if not the absolute worst chapter in the series. And yeah, it's pretty awful. To start, the murder is literally impossible given the time frame, even if it wasn't committed by the clumsiest character in the game. I don't want to talk about the whole thing in detail, so here's the math. Do you want to know what the motive was for this chapter? I don't think I brought it up yet, but Monokuma gives a motive that always plays into the murder case in every chapter. Examples include embarrassing secrets being read unless a killing occurs, or a simple monetary incentive. Do you want to know the motive of Danganronpa 2's third chapter? Do you honestly want to know? Diseases that make you act different. Diseases that make you act different. Diseases that make you act different. Of all the stupidity that these games throw at you, this might take the cake. It isn't even a motive, it literally just makes Mikan kill people. How did any part of this chapter get the okay? Its one saving grace is that it got rid of Ibuki. Good riddance. Chapter 4. It's good. No, it's really good. Like, this is probably the highlight of the entire series for me, though I still have to replay V3 to make sure. To start, the pacing is significantly better. It gets right into the good stuff and nothing about it feels unnecessary. This is the Funtime Funhouse chapter, and the motive for this chapter is that the characters are locked in the Funtime Funhouse where there is no food and can't leave until someone dies. I love this gimmick, especially because you have no idea how this place works, or even how it's laid out, piecing things together over the course of the chapter and trial. I may hate Gundam, but the way he carried out the murder was impressive and one of the most interesting in the series. And just when things are about to get stale during the investigation, you're playing as Nagito now. And 5 minutes later, it's an escape game now, which isn't much fun, but I appreciated the change of pace nonetheless. The series really needs more moments like this. My only complaints are the cast still being terrible, and some parts of the trial felt a bit drawn out. Otherwise, this is a fantastic case that proves if they put more effort in, this game could have been something special. Chapter 5 keeps up the momentum, although I don't find it quite as good myself. Nagito's been crazy from the start, but his lunacy is now peaked and he's threatening to blow the island up with everyone on it unless the traitor is revealed to him. But just when he's supposed to do that, you find him like this. As you wonder who could have possibly done this, it soon becomes very clear that the only person who would have done this to Nagito was Nagito. Everything that happened to him was self-inflicted to create as much confusion as possible to lead the surviving students astray. But it doesn't take the cast too long to realize his plan. Startlingly quick, in fact. Hajime then thinks about things and realizes Nagito found a loophole to prevent this from being deemed a suicide. Oh, you see, I was just holding the spear directly above my abdomen. I wasn't going to drop it. If someone did something that caused me to involuntarily drop the spear into my stomach and kill me, that's not my fault. The person who did that would be responsible for my death, not me. So he started a fire and took out all extinguishing equipment besides some fire grenades. He filled one of them with poison, and when everyone threw them to put out the fire, the poison was released and knocked Nagito out cold, causing him to let go of the spear. The person who threw the poison grenade is deemed guilty, and since everyone just threw them haphazardly, nobody knows who threw the poison. Nagito created a case that was impossible to solve. Or it would be if he wasn't the ultimate lucky student. He had a target and knew whoever he wanted to throw the poison was going to. Partway through Chapter 4, Nagito found out that everyone except the traitor was in ultimate despair, which caused him to resent everyone because he wants all despair in the world to be eliminated. His goal was to have the traitor kill him and survive the trial, killing everyone else in the process. If Chiaki didn't reveal herself as a traitor, Nagito's plan would have worked completely. It's probably the strongest trial in the series on premise. But I just like the Funtime Funhouse. The idea of the characters being trapped in the Funtime Funhouse and having to figure out how the place works to solve the case is simply more appealing to me and why I'd put Case 4 a bit above Case 5. That, and since Nagito dies halfway through, there is no longer a single character I like still alive. Nekomaru should have survived, you sick hacks. Still, both chapters are very strong. If the entire game was even remotely similar to their level of quality, Danganronpa 2 would be recommendable. But as it stands now, I enjoy a third of the game, and am absolutely miserable for the other 2/3. Chapter 6 isn't as bad as chapters 1 through 3. It's worse. Yet again, the worst in the game, and spoiler for the next video, the same is true for V3. The cast somehow enters Hope's Peak, but something isn't right. The investigation is so boring, my god. This was the first time so far I almost fell asleep playing the game. Maybe that's because I knew the twist since I already played this years ago, but that didn't stop me from enjoying other things I saw coming. The twist in question is that Danganronpa 2 is a game. In a game. Everything that occurred so far happened in a simulation in the world of the first game. The 16 students were placed there by an organization called the Future Foundation in hopes of ridding them of the traits that made them ultimate despairs. But who is this Future Foundation, you may ask? Well, the ones who put them in this world are the survivors of the first game. Makoto confirms everything that is going on when he enters the world. Except that's not actually Makoto. Instead, it's no! Junko's back, and she's even more irritating than before. The Queen personality barely even shows up in this one. What a waste. But don't worry, she has new personalities to make up for it.
The graduation program is the core part of this game, so it was protected with a lot of encrypted codes.
What?
I'm gonna do it. I'm seriously gonna do it. If you don't hurry up, I'm seriously
stop
really
making bad
gonna
jokes.
do it.
They never explain how Junko got into the simulation, just that she's a virus that was somehow inserted in. My headcanon is that she was brought in because Nagito sewed her arm onto his body in the real world. Long story. I hope that's the case because I really like the idea that Nagito acted like this in the game while also being the cause of every problem. Well, one thing she says is funny, at least.
Too bad. This isn't a fan service game.
I love it when there's no gameplay and instead it's just 5 hours of Junko talking. That's my favorite thing. Nothing interesting has happened this entire chapter. The twist is... I feel nothing towards it. I don't find it that interesting, nor do I think it ruins the game or anything. I have to talk about the hope versus despair stuff in this game. It's so much worse than before. Like, Nagito was a deliberate satire of how it was handled last time, and he was great. So how is it handled even more cliché when they're trying to touch on it unironically? In the first game, my irritation came from the fact that they were repeating the two words over and over again, instead of applying their definitions with more variety. Danganronpa 2 makes hope and despair states of being. Yeah, I'm well aware the word cringe has been overused out of its unironic existence, but I genuinely can't think of anything else to sum up my reaction to the words infected with despair. Makoto showing up is cool, but that's not nearly enough to save this.
That's not something you need to take your time saying.
Yes, yes,
Try putting
yes.
yourself in our shoes before you drag us into situations like this.
Okay, Kyoko and Byakuya are here. The chapter is good now. Haha, just kidding. They don't really do anything and are much less interesting than they were in Trigger Happy Havoc. Despite that, and the fact that I of course knew they were coming, that was still the highlight of the chapter because I saw Kyoko and that gave my brain the dopamine. I finally got to see characters I actually liked, and they're still way better than anyone left from this game. Except maybe
Please stop
Sonya.
making bad jokes.
The trial's still incredibly dull, just less so when the characters from Danganronpa 1 are on screen. Not you! They try to make me sympathize with Hajime because he's Izuru Kamakura. I'm not explaining what that means, I don't feel like it, but I can't when Hajime has been nothing for the past 30 hours. The same goes for the end of the 5th trial. I think I was supposed to feel really sad when I had to single out the traitor. But again, Chiaki is so boring I didn't feel anything towards her either. I felt pleased when she ended up being the traitor because it's the first and only interesting thing they did with her. Hajime overcomes his doubts and goes Super Saiyan, and Monami comes back for no reason to kill 3D Junko. The characters leave the game world as it's destroyed, I get to see the characters I like one last time in cool outfits, and the game ends. Danganronpa 2 sucks. If you like the first game, I'd say give it a shot, but maybe wait for it to go on sale before you buy it. I hated a majority of the time I spent playing this game. It's not void of quality, far from it, but chapters 4 and 5 made me more disappointed because of how good they were. They are proof that this game could have been better than the first, and something I would genuinely recommend to others, but alas, the rest of the game is garbage. This is still one of the worst, most stale casts of characters in any game I've played, and that alone worsens almost every aspect of the game. And it only gets worse from here. It definitely won't be my next video. Oh boy, I wonder what that'll be. But see you next time in this series for Danganronpa V3, Killing Harmony. My least favorite game of all time. See you then.